Today I feel a bit grumpy, and it's partly because I was sleeping, and since I'm sleeping so much lately with the help of Zoplicone, I missed out on an opportunity to hang out with someone and some little ones that I care about. So I'm sitting here by myself, and if I was up a little bit earlier, then I wouldn't have missed out. There's a lot of bugs in the grass here. So I feel kind of like grumpy about that for some reason. And yeah, I think I heard someone calling me, but I was in my dark room and I just didn't get up. So I feel like it's partly because I didn't know what time it was, and then I looked at the time and it was late and I missed out. So kind of feel bad. Feel maybe mad at myself, because I know I have a bit of a wall up in general. It's sort of like walling off that energy as to not share it with anyone because they don't want it, from what I've seen in previous waves of that energy. So I feel kind of disconnected and even more forgetful about people. And I still feel kind of like I'm just not going to come back. And so maybe part of putting up that wall is just preparing myself for that perspective of, I don't know if I'm coming back. Then I had a little bit of suicidal thinking, and it's like, no, don't think that way. Just think I'm leaving and I'm not coming back here. It doesn't mean, like, death would be the same thing, leaving and not coming back. But so is going on a trip and then going with the flow after that. So I just feel a little bit weird, I don't know. And there are a lot of bugs in this grass. And I signed up for Steve Pavlina's 30-day abundance deep dive. It was $100 US, and I'm just watching some of his bonus videos right now. He has one on subjective reality, which I think is something I need to learn about. And so I'm gonna get a bit more sun today. Then I have an online group later. I feel also maybe a little bit grumpy because I feel like I would like to co-create with somebody, and I thought maybe it would be my brain twin, but he has a bit of a different perspective, which is completely his right. He's more about being manic, or like just being in the moment, just being and not trying to dialogue about it and share or things like that. And that's kind of what I do, and I was hoping to find a dialogue partner to have what I've said to myself start to flow with another person. And he suggested sharing daily videos, which I could do at some point, but I feel like I want to be gone, or I don't know if having security is the right answer, but I think just getting out of here and being on the road to not coming back for however long. I think that's part of my resistance, is that I know that I don't want to come back. So it's like it's almost like saying this energy isn't meant to be here. So if one is around one's family, that energy of change often gets reflected back and implodes and gets turned into, I'm the mentally ill daughter, so nobody else has to change. I change, and people do change around me for a short period of time, and then it sort of comes back at me, and I have to change back, and that is a painful process. So I think just feeling kind of like, okay, I realize this energy wants to create some kind of change, but it's not supposed to happen here. People want to go on with their lives as they are, and that is completely fine. But I just didn't realize that was what was happening. So in that way, I'm suppressing a lot, which is why I haven't really talked to myself too much about insights for quite a long time, because I've been so busy trying to maintain my energy, drugging myself with Zopicone so I sleep 12 or 13 hours a day, which I haven't had to do in a really long time. But if I don't do that, then I find myself kind of frustrated. So just being awake for a few hours, like getting up, showering, doing a few things in the day, and then going back to sleep is sort of what I'm doing. But I don't know if that makes any sense. It doesn't really, but I feel like, okay, I'm going to have to create whatever myself. Oy. These ants are everywhere. I was going to lay on the grass here. I'm going to check out another spot on the grass somewhere else, but I think they're everywhere. I feel kind of bad. I heard this sound and I looked over and there's this guy under the tree back there, and I thought I was all by myself here. It's like nobody around at all, and I was thinking, oh, I'm by myself. I can see him way over there. And I could tell that he was crying. And he was sort of laying on the ground and kicking his feet a little bit and crying, and then he got up and sat on the fence and was crying. And I really wanted to say, hey dude, are you okay? But the sad fact is that I don't feel safe when I'm all by myself here, and there's one single guy who is big and strong over there crying. If I was a man, maybe I'd be less apt to ask, but then I'd also feel safer. But I'm not a man, and so I didn't say anything, and I really think that I should have. Another human being suffering. But when he got up and he went to sit on the fence, he kind of looked over at me when he was crying, and I don't know if that was there's a sense in my brain, keep yourself safe. He could be crying to get you to talk to him. That is where my brain goes to keep me safe. And it's a sad fact that I don't feel safe approaching a man that's crying when, usually men don't cry, so it seemed pretty authentic. But I don't know. Sorry. If there were other people around, maybe I would say something, but there's nobody. Though I could have held my phone with the emergency SOS button ready to go. And then I saw him drinking out of a flask when he left, so he was drinking, which just means that he's in pain. It doesn't, I'm not judging the drinking, but I felt I did feel like I wanted to say, hey, are you okay? And talk with him. But being alone in a park, nobody else is in the parking lot at all. Nobody really comes over here. So I was thinking, oh, this is so nice just to have it to myself. But then somebody in pain wanders in, and I talk a lot about pain and mental health and bipolar and everything, yet I can't reach out to someone who's in pain because my fear of being alone with a man is greater. And that's a sad fact. Sad fact. If a woman smiling at a man can be misinterpreted as, oh, maybe this is going to go somewhere, then I don't know. I just don't feel safe. I think I didn't pass the test there. I think I failed. But at the same time, I didn't want to put myself in an awkward situation. And that is sad. Because that person seemed like he was in a lot of pain. If I looked like a nice older grandma or something, maybe I would. But I don't know. But I want to be able to be with people in those moments. I think it's really important. I think that was a royal mess up. But I was looking at him with compassion, and I just didn't know. Like, I couldn't tell. Obviously he's in pain, but I don't know if he went and sat there on purpose and cried. My female spidey senses are too strong. A lady just complimented me on my tan. I think I must look more tan from further away than I do up close. But I do have tan lines. And I have a dandelion cup holder here. My sleep situation is getting a little bit ridiculous in that I sleep 13 hours, so it keeps ticking later and later and later, unless I'm up less than 12 hours. And then if I'm up more than 12 hours, it ticks an hour later. So today I woke up at 1:45 p.m. So the good thing is that tomorrow I start the Steve Pavlina 30-day abundance deep dive integration. And I watched his bonus videos on subjective reality to do with abundance, relationships, and creativity. And so tomorrow, it starts at 11:11 a.m. and it goes every day at 11:11 a.m. for 30 minutes. and it only cost $100 US, which isn't bad. I was gonna do the thing with the spiritual master, but I hesitated, and I don't know if I'll regret that, because it was $350 US for the course, and then to see him when he's here, the retreat is $1,200 US. So basically, it would basically be over $2,000 Canadian. And that's a lot for me right now, not being in an abundance mindset. So I figured investing in the 30-day class for $100 would be cool. And I am feeling a little bit low. I didn't take any tyrosine or SAMe or methylfolate today because I'm hoping to get to sleep a little bit earlier, and those are quite stimulating. So I'm still going with the balancing brain chemistry stuff, but I am using quite a bit of stuff to knock me out. And I think I'm kind of lazy, knowing that this stuff can knock me out. What I'm taking will knock me out whether I've been up for 10 hours or 12 hours or 14 hours, and it'll knock me out for 13 hours. I kind of like, because I just sleep and sleep and sleep, and I feel that's good. But then now I'm starting to feel like I need to focus a bit more on my dream and not dwell on my present circumstances, which are rationally and logically fine, but they don't feel aligned with my dream. So Steve Pavlina gave out other bonuses to go with signing up for the class, so I might take a look at those, because some of those are little workbooks and things. And I need to deal with my car stereo and that box of burnt papers, and just focus on taking care of those little nitpicky things in order to be able to go away. So I'm going to start taking steps towards that and focus on the fact that I am going away, and I'm happy about that. And also organizing, maybe so I have somewhere to go when I get back. So I'm going to enjoy my 4 o'clock coffee and sit in the sun for a while, and then go to the coffee shop and work on some stuff on the computer. I feel like now that I know that I'm really alone with this, I need to start to create and share value. And hopefully this abundance deep dive will help me with that. I'm sitting at the park with my coffee, and I was supposed to see my GP today for the first time. And so I dressed up a little bit to look more sane. And she canceled because she's unwell. And I was going to ask about getting a prescription for Nazanan for sleep to replace the Zopiclone. And I was also going to ask about getting 3 months of my prescription at a time, so I could go to California for 3 months. I'm going for 6 months, but I would say I'm only going for 3, just to at least get the 3 months, because I do have enough otherwise to get me through that time period. And having a little bit of a dilemma today, because I could get a bit more work in September. And I was thinking of maybe taking off for California September 1st. But if I stay and do the work, I could make a bit of money. Plus, I was calculating, since I was pretty much away for March of this year, and I can only be away 6 months in a 12-month period of time. If I leave in September, I can only stay in California till the end of January. But if I leave after September, I could leave California at the end of March. Now the thing is that I would have somewhere to stay for sure in September, as well as October to December. But if I go October to December, I have somewhere to stay, and then the next 3 months I don't have somewhere to stay. So I'd have an extra month of somewhere to stay if I went in September. The other thing too is I've been back from the island for a month, and it feels really long. Like, it's a long month. It's arduous to knock myself out with sleeping pills and stuff like that. And then also, if I stay, there's the chance that I won't have the sleeping pills anymore, or they'll stop working and I won't be able to sleep. So there's a higher chance of going into crisis if I'm not in the right environment. So I think for me, it's less about the money of September and more about, if I stay here till the end of September, I could stay in California to the end of March, which would get me through pretty much all of winter. So it's more about the sunshine, but then that would mean I have 2 months here. The other thing though is, if I say yes, I can do the work. If something happens and things start to go downhill, I can say, sorry, I can't do it. That would be really bad in terms of the job, but based on how I feel now, I feel like, yeah, I can stay till the end of September, everything will be fine. But that might not be how it plays out over the next month. So I could drop out of that commitment last minute and go away. I would likely lose my job, but my sanity would be more important. And that's the thing, it's hard for me to plan like how long things are going to be good for. And the thing is, I'll probably have another crisis in the end of December. So that would be getting through a crisis while in another country. And throughout my journey, I already feel like I have enough evidence to show that being in a really resonant environment is the most important thing. Because I had the crisis in 2017, and then I went to California and not much happened. I tapered off the meds, and then the crisis came back, and it was really bad being in a not good environment. So yeah, I think I'll say yes to the work and then see how the next couple weeks goes, because I can change my mind based on my wellness. That's not ideal, but it's more based on the fact that leaving in October is ideal in terms of the weather pattern, and I would pretty much be planning to not come back. I would come back, but I don't know, I would be open to kind of anything. And what this time of sort of waking up and doing whatever has taught me, and not doing that much of anything and not feeling like I can do much of anything, just sort of eating at restaurants or what have you. I've been eating a bit healthier lately. I've been having blueberries and then like booster juice versus pizza. So the junk food craving has subsided naturally. And I'm gonna go get a Jugo juice after I finish my coffee. And yeah, so this process has showed me like I really don't need very much. It's almost like I don't even have the capacity to need that. When I'm at my current dwelling, there's all my stuff, and I realize that all that stuff is sort of representative of needing something from the outside to fix me or help me in some way. And I don't think that there's anything that can help me from the outside. And asking for help from the outside is one of the problems. I don't think it's wrong, but I think that we can get to a point where we're not asking for that help. I would never suggest to someone, don't ask for that help if you really are in emergency, but I've seen the subtle ways that we try to ask for help because it's comfortable. It's a very subtle thing. And what I've seen in my own experience is I don't want that kind of help. So working on allowing the energy that's even subconscious of those gestures that would seek to reach out and have others come to one's rescue, to help. You know, when so much of our society is based on help me, like take this, buy this and it'll help you in some way. Like all of advertising is that, in a way. This will make things better, which implies help. And I think that movement of seeking something from the outside is the primary problem. When we think about the state we go into in mania, we don't ask for help, we're creating. It's a creative state. It requires nothing in particular, yet feels like everything. So I'm feeling like I want to write a book on this stuff. Maybe I don't, because I've already talked about a lot of it, and I haven't been talking about it so much lately. I do feel that it's not yet time to share, because I haven't, what I would say before, I haven't embodied my mania. I think that's something that I could work on in the next 2 months, is rather than only sitting here, do something to spark people, not necessarily help them, but spark them. Like there was a lady who started talking to me at the park yesterday and said, "Oh, I really like your tan, you look like you're a lifeguard or something." And we talked for a couple minutes, and then I went and put my little blanket down and just sat in the sun. And she was sort of like across the way at the picnic shelter with her head in her hands, like I don't know, it seems like I could have talked more, but I had my own agenda of sitting in the sun. So even getting rid of that agenda, the agenda to sit by oneself and do nothing, can move towards connecting with others without feeling like helping or what have you. It's just sort of a human faculty. So yeah, that's something I could play with this next month or two, since I'm like sitting here not really doing much anyway. But it's important, I think it's really an important phase to have this bipolar thing and practice really sitting and doing nothing and not allowing that energy to be translated into any kind of human thought structure. Because I feel like, you know, humanity has this content of consciousness, and this is where the teachings of other people come into play too. Like Krishnamurti, he talks about the content of human consciousness and dropping that whole content. And that whole content of consciousness is like, it's like machinery. Like if I say something at somebody, the content of their thinking will be provoked. And I think that's part of what happens when we go into mania. The content of consciousness that we have access to has changed. It's different. It's a totally different energy, and it's more disjointed. It's not like this fully formed structure of human content. Part of the structure of human content would be if people start acting differently, then people start looking at them like they might need some kind of psychiatric help. They didn't come up with that on their own. That's part of psychiatry and things like mental health first aid, training people to look at people like if they're not like they usually are, or something is a little bit off, then they need psychiatric help, and funneling them back into that system of thought. But I feel like through dialogue with each other, we can start to see ourselves in a different way. And I've been thinking about how it's possible. I don't talk in absolutes at all, but it's possible that we as people who are labeled with bipolar, and I'll use the terms bipolar and mania for now because that's what would easily identify somebody as being of similar mindset and heart set. So we have a similar mindset and heart set, but since we're sort of here, there, and everywhere, we're easily enticed into seeing ourselves in terms of the mental illness perspective. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se. I think it is a temporary step. And I don't want to think in terms of, well, everybody needs to transcend ever reaching out for mental health help. I don't think that's true. But I feel like if we end up back in that position of, say, being hospitalized, then we can realize it's sort of like a video game where we just lost a life, but we can start again. So somebody who plays a video game and then loses a life and doesn't get to the end of the level, they might sit there overnight and think, well, how can I do things differently? Or where did I go wrong there? Or what happened? Or the thing with a video game is that it'll be the same the next time, and they can learn. And in this video game that we're in as people with bipolar, it's not necessarily the same in terms of the same things will happen, but it is the same in that it's the same eternity, it's the same eternal now that we're all participating in. And so I'm thinking how it could be really important for us to dialogue with each other about some of these possibilities, because words are really powerful. And to the point, like, I'm reading this book here, and I think reading Dr. David Hawkins' work could be really helpful for us. And even Sean Blackwell, who did his series on bipolar or waking up, talks about the scale of consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins. And I feel that we really need to study consciousness as bipolar people, because we move in mania into a space of being identified with consciousness without knowing it. So instead of identifying as an ego and a body, we're identified more with consciousness, but it's mixed in with the ego identification with the body. So I think that's not necessarily a problem, because by going between the two states, one can work to resolve some of those things that happen as a result of the ego-identified consciousness. And by being aware of what levels of consciousness manifest what sorts of situations, we can sort of know where we're at and how to, say, recontextualize it. So being in the ego consciousness isn't necessarily a problem, but having an awareness of that is important. So, for example, one could realize that when one is around one's family, one is in the ego consciousness, or should be in the ego consciousness. Not as in should, but as in you must. But knowing that, say I'm in a manic consciousness and I'm spouting off new memes and new possibilities and new meanings, they're going to think that's strange. They're going to realize that that's not something coming from the ego. And so it makes them uncomfortable. They'd rather interact at the egoic level. And for me right now, I'm sort of avoiding a lot of those interactions because I don't like manifesting that way, and I don't necessarily have anywhere to manifest in a different way right now, but I'm avoiding that. So, because that potentiates manifesting as that role. And I don't really have other roles yet besides sort of wandering during the day and experiencing this life and not having the pressure to do something in particular, like get a job. And I'm not necessarily against jobs. Right now I'm sleeping a lot, and I'm needing that sleep to stay slowed down enough to manifest on the physical plane. So that's another point. I think that we as bipolar people, we go into a state that the people who treat us, like psychiatrists, haven't gone to. So we can understand it for ourselves in ways by virtue of experiencing it subjectively and sharing that subjectivity with each other. And so that's the importance of studying the scale of consciousness and knowing where we're at, knowing that we don't necessarily control where we are on the scale of consciousness, but the thing that I was talking about with words being powerful, this book, the chapter on health and recovery, Dr. David Hawkins talks about hypnosis and how somebody can be hypnotized to say, when you wake up, you're going to be itchy. And he said some people break out in hives. So they were suggested in a hypnotic state that they'd be itchy, and those suggestions created an immediate sort of epigenetic effect. The words, this vibration of the words changes the genetics such that the proteins were expressed to develop hives. And that could happen more with people that are more suggestible in hypnosis. I don't know that much about it. And I think part of the bipolar consciousness isn't about specializing and doing a study on any particular hypothesis, but having the capacity to come up with hypotheses and make connections. And the connection I want to make is connecting bipolar to human potential, and also making the point that a person on the bipolar path of human potential isn't on this linear upward progression, but it goes up and down the scale of consciousness, and we have access to the whole scale of consciousness, and it could change from enlightenment to death in a snap of a finger, and being able to deal with that type of radical change in consciousness. And so this book is mentioning hypnosis, but again, it's not mentioning it in terms of bipolar, but he's talking about suggestibility. And I'm thinking, and I feel that it's true, that when we get hospitalized and we're in the psych ward, we're in a very vulnerable position, and we're open to suggestion, especially since a lot of things aren't making sense. If somebody starts telling us something that kind of sums it up, we're more willing to go along with it and resign to that. So to be told that one has a lifelong mental illness when one is in this suggestible, vulnerable state, the suggestibility and the vulnerability of the state can be shown with how a person will act on so-called irrational thoughts. So, a thought, which is a suggestion of sorts, the person will act on it. That sentence of words could sentence someone to a life sentence of being mentally ill if they act upon it. So, acting upon those irrational thoughts, or those thoughts that we feel like, hey, I'm not thinking these, where are these coming from? And that's one of the parts that scares us, is we think, I'm not the author of these thoughts, where are they coming from? But truthfully, we're not the author of any of our thoughts. It comes from the pool of thoughts of the collective consciousness. So all of a sudden we're aware that we're not the author of the thoughts, and when that happens and we get afraid of that fact, then we start having fearful thoughts, and then we start having fearful actions. So it's really a snowball effect. And it's really embedded in our body, and how our whole nervous system is designed to act based on the thoughts. So the projection of thoughts, or we hear a thought, think a thought, we think a thought, and then we act based on that thought or not. So we are often controlling which thoughts we act on and which thoughts we don't. And then in mental health situations, sometimes people get to a point where they're acting based on every single thought. And if we're unable to figure that sort of riddle out, then we often become obviously troubled to others, and they may put us in a mental health type situation. Now, I don't know what it's like for some people. I watched a YouTube clip about these people talking about loved ones who died by suicide, who ended their life by suicide. And it was really sad. And these loved ones, they often talked to their parent shortly before they did it and said something, and then they were gone. So I don't know what it's like to sort of pretend you're okay and then die by suicide, where my experience have happened where I feel the suicide program coming on and I don't want to do it, but it's there. We all have this program inside us that can be triggered to go off, to end our lives. And it's very complicated. So for me, I'm talking more about the whole bipolar side of the suicide. And part of it is that the fall from, say, joyfulness, which is level of consciousness 600, or above that, enlightenment, and then falling out of it is so painful that one doesn't want to leave enlightenment. And so the body, by ending the body, one might actually stay there. We don't want to, I don't know if that's true. It could be true, but part of the thing as a bipolar person is that we're still here in the manifest physical world for some kind of reason. And it could be that when we end our lives, we end up living on in the heavenly light realm. But I think we come back out of compassion, even though we're not aware of it. It's compassionate to come back and play the role of ill-functioning sibling or daughter, so that those others can still experience this one who has been labeled with a mental illness in physical form. But I think something that happens in manic consciousness is that we vibrate at a level that makes us see the value of every single person as a human family versus the importance of the genetic family. Not saying one doesn't care about their genetic family, that's not true. If one cares about every human being as much as they care about their genetic family, then the whole world would be a completely different place. So it's not about denying the importance, but somehow we feel like we need to be more, give more love to the genetic family than to our fellow human being on the street. And I'm not saying at this level of consciousness that I'm at now, which is tranquilizing my brain nightly with lots of psychopharmaceuticals, that I'm in the position to feel like I want to act like that. But I have been in those states of consciousness. And I think that's part of this whole bipolar thing, is we need to start talking about how we are and how life is in those higher states of consciousness. Not only talking about our symptoms of the fallout, which they make a lot of sense when you think about them in a lot of different ways. Like I talked about the other day with the monkey experiment. We sort of start to have a fit when we realize that people are no longer responding to the energy of infinite joy and infinite love, and everyone is one family, and enjoying each moment and not differentiating based on programmed ego separate desires. So yeah, so I don't know what to do. I feel like putting together some kind of curriculum. I think only studying, spirituality, we're so spiritual. I don't know if that can work for bipolar, because we do go into states of lower consciousness, and it could be as simple as interacting with one's family. And I think something that I need to work on is not mirroring that, but not responding to it. So not trying to defend myself, but being silent. I don't need to share my perspective with people that don't understand. And when we're around our family most of the time, they don't understand, and I don't know if they're meant to understand, and I don't even know what it is that one is trying to understand. There's nothing particular to understand, and I don't even think all these words that I've said are necessary. They're not. I feel like if I was in the right environment, none of this would be needed. I would be living joyfully in a community of like-minded and like-hearted individuals, and that would just be joyful and what have you. But from this perspective, the perspective is, here I am, alone in a park, diagnosed with bipolar. When I'm around like-minded and like-hearted people, we sit and don't talk about things that we've experienced in subjective consciousness, because we all feel, I just have this mental illness, and it's all a bunch of crap. So, I think we've all been hypnotized, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We're all hypnotized by the structure of thought. And so when we go beyond that, it gets scary at some point. Psychiatry is about hypnotizing us back into a system of thought and giving us a system of thought through which to understand the strangeness. And part of the strangeness is we can't understand the strangeness. We can't at all. And so being okay with that unknown. And so I've talked about so much of it along the way, and I've gone through different phases, and the phases go a lot more slowly than I would like in a way. But if I go back to California, I'll be able to test if I'm able to not be on as many psychopharmaceuticals to sleep, because the environment is more of the vibration that I'm at. And I think I already showed that. And then it also shows I don't need much just to live in a high vibe community. You don't need that much. So all these words and everything are partly a manifestation of the lack of design of society. If one was in mania and one wouldn't talk about this stuff per se. And that's, I think, another thing about the power of words. If we start sharing our manic words, or the words that we have when we look at the experience of mania in retrospect, then perhaps we can spark those brain cells to come back online, right? So if somebody can be hypnotized to have hives, when we start talking these words with each other, that could embed that structure into the brain and the nervous system and the being, so we start acting in those ways again. I'm not sure if we need safe space for that, and maybe we don't need to act in those ways as much as we need to learn not to act based on the marionette system of thought. So to be at a place now where I'm referred to my GP, I'm not part of the structure of the whole mental health system, part of the GP system. Perhaps I'm hoping in the next number of months I can get out of that, possibly. Be in a place where I can taper and use less meds, and then I have more meds on hand to use if I do get into a situation where I need them. Like the tranquilizers, they just slow down the vibration, and matter is a slower vibration than light, so it makes one more able to manifest in this world of matter. If we don't get enough sleep, we end up feeling like we're going to end our lives, and then if we do end our lives, we probably just go off into the dream world. We wake up from a bad dream of, oh wow, that was a bad dream, being diagnosed with a mental illness. But we're still here for some kind of reason, and we need to communicate with each other and have an understanding inside ourselves that nobody will know if we understand it in these ways that we're talking about with each other. They can't read our minds. We can read theirs sometimes, but they can't read ours. But they do know if we're acting based on fear. So we have to no longer be afraid. No longer be afraid of this deconditioning process, which can be really painful at times. So there's so much to be said about it, and yeah.